CERN is called CERN, okay? The official name for CERN is the Center for European Research Nucléaire, because it's French.
Oh,
so
hey, can you
that's
talk about the logo, too, while you're talking, the initial about the CERN, but talk about the logo, too, because I think that's very telling as far as, what they're trying to achieve.
Yes, the logo is, when you look at the logo, it's obviously a 666, okay?
Right.
It's the graffiti of the fallen ones graffiti, basically. And and when you look, if you look in the Who Funds CERN and stuff, you'll find the Rothschild Group is in there funding them. So, anytime you run into these guys, they're working for the other side. Okay,
right.
But they have a public face, and a lot of these, a lot of people in science aren't necessarily privy to these type of agendas. They just work for people who pay for their projects. This was what came out of Nazi Germany with the compartmentalized scientific research. When you compartmentalize it, you receive your funding, you do your project. You may not know what the whole big picture is, but you've finished your project. And I used to joke that my favorite movie for people out there that connects those dots of what that's like is the Val Kilmer movie Real Genius from the 1980s, if you remember that.
Right.
And these guys are building a laser, but they don't know why they're building a laser. They just need to get a certain output. And the guy working with them is building a dish. And they don't know he's building a dish. But then the two of them get together in the end and said, "Why do you think you're building a targeting dish?"
Right.
And they have it being shot off a B-2 bomber. All their stuff gets confiscated. But that is compartmentalization. That is the famous Nazi way of not letting the right hand know what the left hand's doing. So
right.
I'm just giving that as an example to give you a visual as what I think that a lot of the people who work on these projects what happens to them. Years ago, I did articles on the dead astronomers conspiracy stuff. Why are all these physicists and stuff dying? Why are they just showing up assassinated and dead? And and we weren't thinking of CERN back then, but you can see that a lot of these high-level quantum physics, all this stuff, astronomical, astrophysics, a lot of these guys started disappearing. Probably about 4 or 5 years ago, about that time. You remember those? Yeah,
it seemed like one of the links was possibly, or there was some speculation that there was some links to, the whole Vatican, the Lucifer telescope, watching the return of the destroyer, or Wormwood, Planet X, something about that possibility. But yeah, nobody, this wasn't even on anybody's radar, and so it would be interesting to me, if in their background there was connects to CERN and what they are actually trying to achieve. And also, would you answer, do you think that this is technology that the fallen angels in ages gone by, even maybe possibly before the flood, they had this kind of a thing, and that they were opening stargates and portals in such manner and that this is kind of humanity's being led to recreate this technology and possibility as it has been done prior, because it does say in the Emerald Tablets talking about how such things were achieved even during Atlantean times.
Yeah, I absolutely believe this is advanced fallen angel technology in the sense that it's fallen angel technology, but it has modern collaborating fallen men or sinful men collaborating, because the veil is still there as far as them being on the outside, on the other side, but they whisper through and they possess through the demonic and all these rituals and all the ritual stuff that they do. with these people who get inspiration. They get inspiration for these things. If you remember with the Nazi belt, the Vril Maidens were these channelers that got inspiration, right? So they got these plans from being inspired. So I think you're seeing the same thing with these type of projects, because it's coming from that side. But these scientists are brilliant. Of course, they're brilliant, But the point is this mad science? And of course, and my reply, of course, is yes. This is the Mary Shelley Frankenstein model of doing science here. So because of the players you got involved here, So yes, I think CERN is a stripped down, modern version of a pyramid, if you want to look at it that way. A pyramid is the name pyre means a fire in the middle. So the fire is the pyramid would draw piezoelectrical frequencies from the Earth energy up in a conical way up to the point up there. Dr. Joseph Farrell, I believe, had Giza Death Stars where he talks about using it as a directed energy weapon, and that possibly some of this planetary destruction that you talk about, Zen, with Rahab or Tiamat things happening with these directed energy weapons of the fallen angels. Who knows? But CERN definitely has a direct energy weapon component to it because we talk about the plasma, Birkeland currents being the amount of energy they're measured in TeVs, or tera electron volts. And if you want to see this stuff, you can go to anthonypatch.com. He's monitoring what they're putting out. Supposedly between, today, up to the 13th of this month, they're supposed to shut down after the 13th. So we're kind of watching it up to the 13th because they're bombarding lead right now. And as you know, lead ions is the alchemy, the Hermes Trismegistus, the elite, the pill of immortality or the philosopher's stone. The whole thing of immortality was changing lead to gold, changing man from his base nature to gold or a higher spiritual evolution. So when you're moving this kind of energy, which has not been done before, because these energy levels are way beyond what people are used to seeing, we're just watching and seeing what's going on. And I noticed that, and with Chris, I would love more help from amateur astronomers who are Christian, but I noticed when the Paris talks happened, we just went into that 13th constellation of Ophiuchus, the serpent, the day that they started that. And, of course, Chris and I right now are watching this thing with the unicorn going through the end of December. And the unicorn is a major player in some of the material that we're putting together, this symbol of the unicorn. And so it's very interesting. So, yes, I do believe CERN is a modern-day multi-purpose pyramid technology from the fallen angels and that technology line. So I do think it has they get a lot of this from that.
Sorry about that. For those that don't know, as far as Ophiuchus, it's as far as the zodiac, it's the 13th house. It's a sign which is not included in the 12 houses of the zodiac, but the sun spends more time in this particular house in this particular sign than it does in I can't remember the one that is right beside it. But anyways, can you also talk about as far as the connections to the Bible and biblical context, and and so that we can cover that part of it as well, and then we can move into and also what it is that you actually think that they are trying to do. I mean, because it seems like in my interview and discussion with Chris that they're adding all these different chemicals or different metals and different, and it seems like there's an alchemical base. We know that there's a Stargate component as well, and you said that there's also some connection to they're creating possibly hybrids or something of a genetic DNA type of, So what are all the possibilities of what that they are trying to actually achieve, and if you have insight?
If you notice Lord of the Rings, right, or you notice the movie Avatar, you notice that they're creating, and I thought Lord of the Rings was interesting because they did it in like a 300-foot hole in the ground where they mixed goblin with orc or whatever they did to make these hybrid super warriors in Lord of the Rings, if you remember. Especially, I think it was the Two Towers.
Yeah, I do.
The Two Towers one would have definitely been the one. And again, the Two Towers is symbolic, right? The Twin Towers, the Two Towers,
right.
Jachin and Boaz, all that stuff, the 13th pillar, these things, okay? So there's the symbolism in there. The symbolism with Avatar is that you have the shell that can have an indwelling spirit. This is, I think, the feat of the Nebuchadnezzar statue in Daniel, the miry clay and iron.
Right.
The Iron Kingdom, which is this mechanical kind of Holy Roman Empire, still connected, science-based, mechanical type of kingdom that is blended with this Genesis 6 stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's all built in, if you look big picture, it's all built for the Battle of Armageddon. These dew weapons, everything is supposed to be right there at the battle. Everything's supposed to be lined up. It sounds outlandish when you talk about it, but I mean, basically the Lord of the Rings, all these hybrid armies brought together for a battle to meet Jesus as he returns. And, they have their allegiances with the left-hand path humans that follow the left-hand path and the occult to join together. And I mix a lot of the psychological and movie stuff in with ancient and this because I have to bridge between the ancient history and what normal people can connect to. Most people raised in this culture are raised visually, raised in a storybook form, raised on these modern movies. And so if I can link these movies to these topics or aspects of them, it helps them to grasp it, I think. And so, like the Avengers movie,
right.
Tony Stark is a transhumanist. He would be, the Kurzweil of the movie or something. And then you have the super soldier programs from the World War II with Captain America. So, and you got those guys. And then you just got the mutants or the hybrids, and then you got the demigods, which are just a combination of Nephilim,
Right, right.
So you can see that all the same players are involved in this that these old biblical stories talk about. The men of renown, all that stuff. You can see these players that they're just playing it out in a modern script. So what was the question again? I'm sorry.
Well, first let me comment, and then I'll tell you the question. But yeah, I think you're wise to make metaphorical connections in that way because a lot of people understand and even the different layers and levels as far as Marvel, the comic book heroes or Hollywood and with Thor and the Avengers and Captain America and all that, and they can if you can help them to understand it in that way, they totally will get it. Whereas Cern and the topics, Stargates, this kind of stuff, for a lot of people, it will be seemingly over their head and not make sense to them in any kind of way that way. And so, yeah, I think you're wise to do and make those kind of connections. But anyways, the question that wanted you to allude to was the biblical connections, and also what is the aim, what is the goal, as far as, and you can break that up if you want to answer the second part first, as far as the aim, the goal, what they're trying to achieve, the different aspects to CERN, and then start laying out the biblical side of it from the scriptural perspective of what also that they're trying to do and trying to achieve and all that.
Well, I think obviously the main biblical connection that most people have already been able to grasp is the Revelation 9:11 connection, which is the Apollyon being given the key to the bottomless pit. Now, Apollyon is also Apollo, but you have to look where CERN is built. CERN is built over the temple of Apollo in that area where it's built. So, and this area has also been connected to the gates of hell, So what are we doing building scientific, because, if you've gone through academia, as I've gone through academia and tons of it, they like to sound scientific and they don't like to bring myth into their stuff, which is any belief system outside of the scientific model. So here they are, they're building this thing in an area of Apollo. They're building it 300 feet down, which is interesting. I think that, to me, the way I look at that is it's more like, it's kind of like when these Birkeland currents connect and stuff. I think they have to be below the ground to get the overlap, like the two circles, when you overlap two circles to get the Vesica Pisces. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the Vesica Pisces, that section is where the entities can come through.
Right.
So I think that's why the depth into the ground. But they also, you have to look at the ley lines and all that kind of stuff, which I find fascinating. I study, I like the megalithic structures. My background was archaeology, and I seriously, if I could have known about megalithic structures and all that, I would have been gangbusters just studying that stuff. But
right.
So
one other thing, as far as what you're also related, in the Emerald Tablets, it talks about too that prior to any of our, the creation of these deep underground bases by any of the governments of the world, that the Atlanteans, or at least the fallen angels, that prior they had already built bases and structures within the interior of the earth, perhaps at a time when it was not conducive as far as life on the surface, or who knows, a global as far as an ice age or something. Even like in that place in Turkey, I forget the name of it, Cappadocia, where they have the underground, all these structures that were built into the underground that weren't discovered. There's like tunnel systems and huge cities and structures of that nature all over the world, unifying a lot of these places, but that even Phil Schneider talked about how they were already building on top of existing structures. And so who knows, as far as what's already down there and how it, because even with the so after the destruction of Atlantis, if they did open Stargate or something of that nature, even if that kind of thing was closed, or if it's still open even today, because we see, there's all the anomalies and the things that happen there in the Devil's Triangle or the Bermuda Triangle, even on the other side over there by Japan, and who knows, what is in the interior that is still going on that we don't know about. After the flood of Noah's day, so many civilizations, cities, and structures were swallowed up in mud and debris and muck. What kind of things are even below there?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think Noah's, when they had the flood, the fountains coming up from the ground and the coming down from the heavens, this two-way thing, totally destroyed the original ley line grid that the earth was operating off of, and that the fallen angel Nephilim system was having its hive mind or its connections.
Right.
Because if you follow any of the work of the New Agers who are into the sacred sites, the Stonehenge, which I posted yesterday, about the blue stones, they found out where the blue stones came from, so I posted that article on Facebook yesterday. If you notice the New Agers who can follow ley lines, visually can see them and stuff like that, it's interesting that listening to some of these people, they've sat on points in ley lines where they followed the ley line in their mind over to, say from Europe to China, and were able to connect with somebody else on that ley line. And to me, that is the hive mind stuff that they're trying to do with, as we say with the Terminator movies, Skynet. They're trying to jack us in, instead of us, being in this kind of ley line system, which they can't recreate. They can create a ley line above us through these satellite grids. And I think when they're doing if you notice the chemical spraying, it's done in grids, and it's done in the atmosphere. And I think it connects to this network or matrix kind of network in the air to bounce signals off of. There's something interesting about it that I'm still researching, but I'm just putting that out there for what I'm talking about today. Yeah. The original biblical connection that people are making is they're making it the connection with Cern, the portal opening, Apollyon, and they want something to come through this vortex, which of course is from the pit, And so it's interesting. What I connected it to, this is the new material that I connected through prayer and reflecting on this, was I've connected it, which you'll find kind of funny, because I heard you and Jonathan Fleck this past week when you did your shows talking about the keys to the kingdom of heaven, and that, of course, comes from Matthew 16. And that parable, and I was going, and that is the same parable that is actually connected to understanding and connecting Cern to Jesus, and that is the objective of Cernunnos' box and Lucifer's gate.
Can you read the scripture if you have it handy, just so
Sure.
people? All right, cool.
So I have Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. It's basically Peter declares that Jesus is the Messiah. Okay, very interesting. It says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, now that's significant, he asked his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you, he asked. Who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And then Jesus replied, and this is significant, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of, and in the King James here it says Hades, will not overcome it. The gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. So
Interesting.
That is a very interesting section. Caesarea Philippi is, if you research this parable, it is widely believed that Jesus is standing in front of a grotto that's in the backdrop, that's a dedicated cave system, grottos, where they have old pagan religions used to dig into the mountainsides and make little indents and put statues of idols and stuff in there, and people would make pilgrimages to this stuff. And so right behind him, according to tradition of this parable, is the area called Paneas, based off the god Pan, and you have the gates of hell. Okay, so when you're reading this verse, he's giving a visual lesson to his disciples with the gates of hell behind him, saying, "And the gates of hell will not prevail against you." And the point is, the two deities associated with the gates of hell there were the goat god Pan and his daddy, Hermes. And if you trace Hermes, Hermes is Mercury in Roman mythology. He has the wings on his, he's a messenger god, right? The messenger god.
Right.
But Hermes also is the god that escorts souls to Hades. He transports them. He escorts them. So Pan is his son, and Hermes is the transport god, and this is the entrance to, like, the gates of hell. But Hermes gets his name from Mount Hermon, if you go back to where this all originally started. So in this area, if you get this in your head, that this whole 200 watcher angel thing that came down in that area, Mount Hermon, and they came down from the mountains, from the spiritual realm into the physical realm to mate with women. And in this area of Caesarea Philippi is this dedicated area to the god Pan and Hermes and this gates of hell thing. And that has a long history of goat sacrifice even before this in that area. This whole area near Mount Hermon, where the UN is now with their outposts, is a very supernatural kind of origin of this fallen angel stuff coming to Earth. And then moving forward with
the
their
giants
mission.
Also. Yeah, the giants also, the bloodline and lineage of the giants were also centered in that area, Og of Bashan and all of that.
Right. So in Canaan, when they were coming in there, and Joshua had to go clear them out, and everybody thinks that the God of the Old Testament is an insane, crazy God based on dealing with these, these giants, getting rid of them all. So that's how people used to look at it. But if you understand what Zen's been teaching, and you understand the seed of the serpent, then you understand there's a reason for things happening that way. Right. So this parable is very important because what you start to see with Cern, and I'll start getting into the gods of Cern. If you know the god Cernunnos, he is a Celtic god, okay? And I'm going to connect to a little bit of modern paganism and modern Wicca, neo-paganism stuff. They basically, neo-paganism has as the male aspect the horned god, and as the female aspect the goddess, okay? So Cern is kind of the Celtic version of the horned god, but Pan is also a horned god too. He's also connected to this thing. So here we have Jesus talking about the gates of hell will not prevail against you, talking about the god Pan, Paneas, and Hermes here. And over here in Cern, we got the big thing that people are associating with the abyss and opening the abyss and opening up the gates of hell. And it's also associated with Pan. So you see where I'm going. Mm-hmm. So the connection I'm making is that it's a modern-day connection to even the modern Christians that even though they have plans to open up the gates of hell and unleash these things from the abyss, the gates of hell will not prevail against those followers of Christ. This
right.
is what I'm making the crossover from the parable in Matthew 16 to what we're dealing with the opening of the abyss and these portals that they're opening.
Right. And also, as far as like the 4 angels released from the river Euphrates, and also the locust army in Revelation 19, that a lot of that is connected to the wrath of God, and that is poured out on those not written into the books of life, and that do not have the protection of the Most High upon them.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, it's fascinating to me, just the connecting of what's going on here. Here we got the fallen angels are talking through their veil to their channelers, to those who have given themselves over to all the forbidden things that you're not supposed to give it over to, that's talked about in the Old Testament, about speaking with necromancy and all these other things. The Madame Blavatsky group, the Alice Bailey group, and they're communicating this just like Tesla did, and Tesla had communicated with this aspect also, a lot of this technology. And so they got inspired, they had these visions, and they created what they saw. And they were instructed to continue until they fulfilled whatever they're creating for their masters, which are the fallen angels on the other side. They want to open up the portals and bring through the Titans and all that stuff. And that, of course, then that connects us to the whole Saturn thing, and I know that you've had some people on talking about that.
Mm-hmm. I would also make comment, too, that people that have not looked into the Nazi regime and to the technology, even for World War II, like even the V-2 rocket and several other things, shooting, using missiles and all, they had a lot of advanced weaponry and a lot of designs for stuff that they used, even in World War II, that was so much far beyond what the other countries of the world had as far as weaponry for wars. We know about the Vimana and that they had working models. There's pictures of that kind of thing, and the links to the Nazi bell and all of that. And so they were definitely in contact with something otherworldly for them to even use stuff that, the designs for the war machines that they were even using in World War II, not even the stuff that was discovered after the war, the diagrams and the research and that kind of thing. And then there's speculation that they established and had set up Antarctic bases, and that a lot of their really high technology stuff was relocated to there, and that Admiral Byrd and his whole operation high jump and going to south down to the South Pole and all that area, that had to do with chasing down some of that stuff. But
yeah, that's where I started it off at, actually, when I was first writing this book, not knowing that Tony's going to finish his book or that Chris was going to be back involved. I was starting at right at Operation High Jump with the build-up to Cern in the 50s. The reason I peg Operation High Jump as a main jumping-off point is because the Roswell incident had just happened before this and was now being covered up. And then they're rushing off to Antarctica to deal with this missing Nazi component that believed in the hollow earth and went down to Antarctica and an entrance into establishing a base there. So when I look at Nazi Germany, when I look at them, they are the first weaponized occult army of the modern age. And that they so outmatched the Russians and the Americans that if all you got to do is just listen to the stories about the guys who were in the Sherman tanks versus Panzer tanks, or the guys in the ME-262s. I mean, everybody was sitting ducks. Even the P-51s, if they would have had enough of the ME-262s, couldn't have held up to these a swarm of jet fighters if they had gotten to that point. But this is where I did a lot of research in the Nazi stuff, because I do believe that they are a weaponized occult. These guys, what's happening now in America is very similar to what happened to Nazi Germany. What Obama's doing with gun control and all this stuff is what Hitler did with gun control.
Right.
What's going on right now is exactly pre-Nazi Germany, and it's happening here. And, of course, we got the whole Bush family. We know that if you do any research, it's a whole Nazi connection there. Prescott Bush, everything is connected to the Nazi regime and all that. But what's interesting about the Nazis is I believe they started off just like with the Catholic Church back then, where they did this patriotism like we're seeing on the TV right now, where every other episode on, every talk show you see is some kind of patriotic show, patriotic this, patriotic that, and they're trying to mix Christianity as being patriotic. But then what Nazi Germany did is they took the Catholic Church and they pushed forward the Christian nationalistic thing, and then they put the swastika with it, and then they dropped the cross as they progressed and just kept the swastika. That's what Obama's trying to do here. He's trying to do the same Nazi model, which is you get us fighting in a patriotic way, and then drop the cross out of our history, and then we're just a perpetual war machine like Nazi Germany was. So that's what I see, and I see the connections. We have a lot more connections here with what's going on with the gates of hell, Matthew 16, and all those kinds of things. But getting back to Operation High Jump, I think that I studied what was his name? He's with Shark Hunters, and is Harry something, and I can't remember his last name. But he put out Hitler in South America. It was a great research book by a bunch of U-boaters who have all kinds of the Shark Hunters are U-boat crowd, and they're all U-boat buffs, so they know where all the U-boats are and all the missing U-boats at the end of World War II. These guys are still tracking the movements of all these U-boats and their stories and all this kind of stuff. So basically, with Martin Bormann and Hitler, they got him out of Germany into South America, and there's all kinds of documented proof that Hitler died in South America, living out the last of his days there. And then Martin Bormann, basically the biggest bank heist known to mankind, occurred when he took all the assets of Germany with him, gold-wise, and they had what was called the Bormann Group, and he got to put. I think that's what we're dealing with. These multinationals we're dealing with now are just front shell companies for these this kind of Bormann Group takeover of because Nazism is fascism, and fascism runs off multinational kind of businesses that are they're loyal to the state, but they're not loyal to the citizens. And so this whole multinational thing has a very fascist feel to it. And I think that they're shell companies for these Nazi gold and Rothschilds and all that stuff. But so Operation High Jump, I think the United States got defeated decisively in Operation High Jump. And then you can see the deaths of the Secretary of Defense right after that. And also Admiral Byrd had a strange death too, because they were trying to warn the American people that there's going to be a threat coming from UFOs, basically. And I think that's when you got the Men in Black cracking down on UFO stuff. I think the Eisenhower administration, when they had that big flyover, it was a demonstration of power over Washington to say, we can pop up here anytime we want to.
Right.
And I think that this is why they started working with the fallen angel Nazi aspect.
Right. Right. I would also
So if you look at the
wanted
CIA that was established by Gellin after World War II, it's a Nazi front. Operation Paperclip with NASA, Nazi. We just got Nazis all throughout our government, and it's like whenever you put cancer in the human body, you're going to get more cancer. And unfortunately, the United States has succumbed to cancer, in my book.
Right. Right. Yeah, they brought in so many more than they even, made the public aware of, even though they were trying to hide all that initially. But there were so many individuals and scattered throughout all these different departments that were brought in, and we only know about those that were, very famous or very predominant. But even like Joseph Mengele with getting him involved in all like the Montauk experiments and things like that. And then there's so many of these people that have come up with these Illuminati families that talk about some of these Nazi characters and their connections to some of these destructive programs as far as the mind control and this creating multiple personalities through trauma-based, tactics and techniques, and so there's a lot that we don't know about from all of that time, and even now as far as the government, and there's a lot, even Eisenhower and the connections to the fallen angels, the deep underground bases now, individuals like Thomas Costello, Phil Schneider that talked about how there's this relationship. And this is all, again, just so far out there that as far as the regular public, the masses, the sheeple, it sounds so crazy that, it doesn't even sound possible. And yet the reality of the situation is that we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but these powers and these principalities. And sometimes it's hard for us to connect it, biblically in that way, but that's what's going on. And then now with the whole the History Channel, the Ancient Aliens, there's this stuff being brought out to the forefront, and in my opinion, all that is being done so because they want to establish these beings as our creators, and rather than lead people to a biblical understanding of the prophetic nature and esoteric nature of what we're dealing with as world, they want to trick them, just like as they did with evolution and things like that. They want to trick them into believing that these ancient aliens are our creators, and so much of so many people that aren't grounded in the Bible and the understanding as far as the deeper, more profound aspects of it, they are so ready and willing to bow down to these fallen gods.
Oh yeah, and that's why I follow the superheroes things, because people might think you're just being silly when you follow this Marvel stuff and all that, but no, you have to look at when Marvel's the main line being put out to kids today. If you listen to all these shows, is that I'm going to save the world. How many times have you heard that line?
Right.
Okay, so what does that mean? That means you're going to be a hero. Okay, well, what was a hero in ancient times? What were heroes called in ancient times?
Demigods, yeah.
They're gods. So if they're gods, then we're going back to the garden, aren't we?
Right.
So, I'm just trying to just string it together and just make it as obvious as possible. Let's see, Redbox released Ant-Man today, and I saw that it totally checked out by everybody instantly, because they eat this stuff up. They're eating up this stuff, and it's just, so we're trying to point out that our bodies, we were made in the image of God. We're the image bearers of God. We don't communicate in God in the flesh. We create in God in the spirit. His Spirit, our spirit communes. You have to be born again to connect that bridge to back to become spiritually alive. We're spiritually dead till we accept Christ. And so the wheat and the tares is the separation going on right now. And what they're trying to do is just like the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang story, where you had the child catcher in his little cage with his candies, trying to lure the kids into the cage so that they could get powers, okay? And they're doing it with the comic books. They're doing it with the video games. And these kids aren't grounded. Kids aren't grounded in biblical truth,
right?
Because their parents are being worked to death, and they're not putting in the time educating their children in biblical truth. They're having to rely on these churches to educate them, and it's only for 1 hour a week, something like that.
Right. And as far as the deeper, more profound aspects of the scriptures, they're not getting that from the mainstream churches, as far as they don't even talk about the giants or the fallen angels, or the seed of Cain or any of that. They're just getting the basic Sunday school type of thing, which if you are interested in, because as far as the ancient aliens, they have to go to shows like the History Channel, which completely subvert Christian worldview. As far as I saw one, and I did a show on this, where they basically have Lucifer and Satan as the good guy, and how they were talking about how he sacrificed of himself to bring high technology and to give us the comforts of life and living, and the whole thing taught in Masonic secret society that Lucifer as the light bearer, that he, like Prometheus, he gave of himself in order to bring us fire so that we could live a grander and more comfortable life and have access to free will and all that. And so he's portrayed as the good guy, just as these ancient aliens, that they're going to be the saviors of humanity and all of that. And so, yeah, I fully see it.
Yeah, and, and I try to point out to people that the kids are targeted big time. Just what you were talking about there, the Prometheus story, if you go back to the animated movie The Croods is the Prometheus story, because it says that your base nature, you're a slave but the light bearer illuminated you and brought you from this crude state into this illumination. Right. And that whole movie is to prepare the children for the illuminator. And I also try to talk about, I really harp on this big time, this Luciferian mind control, the Luciferian indoctrination. What I mean by Luciferian, that's what these guys who follow Lucifer, who thinks he's the good God, these Rothschilds. Some of these guys are pure Satanists, and they know what's up. Yeah. The other ones who are duped think that they're following Lucifer, the positive side of the Lucifer duality, Satan being the negative side, Lucifer being the positive side of dualism, which is a total fabrication, that is a trap. It's a mental trap that Jesus does not have a duality in him. The duality comes from the fallen aspect of sin, iniquity. Iniquity entered Lucifer, and then Lucifer creates this duality between the angel of light and Satan, and but it's all him to begin with. So, this Luciferian, what we're dealing with now. My background is a lot of psychology, a lot of therapy, a lot of so I understand PTSD. I understand. I dealt a lot with phobias. I dealt a lot with trauma. Well, with the media, what they're doing, the governments, what they're doing, the military, what they're doing, and they are continually keeping a heightened level of trauma on the citizenry. And anybody who knows mental health, that you have people who are, the Bible says take care of the feeble-minded. It says that you are responsible to take care of the feeble-minded. All that means is some people are much more susceptible to their, I call them the circuit breakers in families and society, too much stress gets on them and they start decompensating or having anxiety-related problems. And then they can get into losing, they can get into having psychotic episodes and stuff like that. What they're doing is they're keeping the pressure on, just like the movie V for Vendetta, which is an MK Ultra mind control, Luciferian mind control movie. That movie with Natalie Portman, where she gets tortured, and of course they shave her head, just like they love to do to these girls. Shave their heads, and it's kind of like destroy their identity to give them a new identity. But it's also a way of dissociating them from their old self to a new self. That's why they use the butterfly and the transforming from the worm to the butterfly kind of thing. But it is, you induce enough trauma on people, then they start dissociating or they start breaking down. And what the government wants is they want a certain faction of people in this country to break down and start shooting, because then those won't be the false flags. Those will be people actually, they have decompensated to a point where they're acting out illegally. And then the media and the government all rush there to tape it all happening because they didn't create this. The false flags are the ones they create to heighten the anger. So they're waiting till we get to such a stress level where you have this kind of thing. Now, of course, with Obama and these Muslims and all this stuff, this is all to induce fear, trauma, to provoke a reaction so that people overreact and the government overreacts. But again, this is like V for Vendetta, if you look at that movie. He basically says, just like Lucifer said, I'm the good guy, I had to torture you and to break you down so that you could see reality as it really is, not as what you thought it was. And then Natalie Portman, of course, bonds together with him. And this, of course, is the Patty Hearst thing that happened, the Stockholm Syndrome. Now, there's only a certain percentage of the world that will bond with the abuser, and the rest they got to get rid of because they see through the facade. So this is why you got this massive bloodletting in the end times, because there's a certain group of people who will never buy this stuff coming from the elites, and they're going to be the terrorists. They're labeled the terrorists because they can think. As long as you can think, you're the enemy. And once you've been traumatized and damaged into bonding with the abuser, that's who they want, and that's who Lucifer wants to deceive.
Yeah, got to get rid of those that won't toe the line, the sheeple.
Yeah, they want the sheeple, the ones that are brain damaged, so that they'll just go along with whatever's said. The thinkers become the terrorists.
Right.
Because
follow the others to slaughter.
What was that?
It's those that will follow the others to the great slaughter, as far as the sheep and the
wine
cattle.
presses of the Bible, right?
Right.
Oh, boy. So that's a lot to pack into one show. I mean, I covered some ground there, but I want to just get out what I'm thinking regarding what we're dealing with. And, of course, we have a short amount of time. But going back to the booklet, it does cover the parable, Matthew 16. It does cover the coming Christian persecution, which is a parallel to the first century persecution that came through Nero. And we also include a lot of material on the unicorn connections to this material. So it's not a quantum physics connection that you're hearing when people talk about Cern. The quantum physics aspect, I think Anthony does a super job with that. I just thought that these biblical connections and the gods of Cern really show you the who you're fighting with when you're dealing with this type of technology.
Right. Yeah, so when is it already available to to anybody that's interested, or how when are you planning on making that available? How would people go about finding it? I mean, do they need to contact you? How would they locate?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is that we have Chris is illustrating it right now, and we have she's putting out a video today regarding the booklet, connecting the different aspects of the ancient history with Nero, the 666, the mark of the beast, all the connections we have with these parables, these end times events related to these portals opening, and these hordes coming out that are connected to to dealing with what we're facing, And of course, we completely believe that we believe in this is a spiritual battle, as Ephesians 6 says, and just like you quoted, and wrestling not with flesh and blood.
Right.
And we believe that we have to be grounded biblically. We have to ask for the protection of the angels from the Lord to protect our families, friends, cities, neighborhoods, communities. Pray for the sane people that are in government, that their sanity wins out. The terrorists who are dedicated to doing evil, pray that their plans are disrupted and not able to come to fruition. And I believe, of course, prophecy will be fulfilled as is written in the book of Revelation, Daniel, Joel, all the prophetic things we're looking at. Isaiah 17 with Damascus, looks like that's happening right as we're talking. And Ezekiel 38, Psalm 93, all these things are going on right now. And as watchmen, just trying to get people to get saved and to wake up out of this funk that they're in,